guys, this is part 2 of the class discipline and problem students video, and I'll link part 1 in the description box below just in case you haven't seen it. Here I'm going to be talking about the biggest problem students that I did have and how I resolved those issues. And they all turned out perfectly fine, so hopefully that can encourage you guys. Normally you're not going to have any huge problems with students. If you ever have a problem and you really just don't know how to deal with it in that moment, my biggest advice, as I said in the first video, is to just send that student out of the class. If you have, you may have them refuse to leave the class, and if they're just causing a bunch of problems, you might just have to ignore them and continue with the class. And afterwards, ask another teacher what you should do and explain to them the situation. I haven't had a student refuse to leave class, but I did have a situation where I didn't know what to do about it. The first one happened the second week that I was teaching. I had a class of BTS students who are older students. So in France, when you finish high school, you can continue to take other programs and certifications at high schools. And just to summarize really quick, so that's that class I had in the mornings. And these students are ages 19 to 24. So I even have students that are the same age as me, which is quite intimidating. You would think students who are 24 years old would know how to be respectful in a classroom, but no, they're not all able to be respectful in a classroom. I had two students. They kept talking to each other during the class while I was talking, and so I asked them to be quiet once, and they said, okay, we'll be quiet. They continued talking, so I stopped talking, waited for them to stop, and then I said, okay, this is your last warning. You got to stop talking. I don't want to treat you like children, but you need to be quiet. So they stopped talking again for about 5 minutes, and then they started again. And I said, okay, I don't want to treat you like children, but if you're going to act like children, that's how I'll treat you. You need to separate yourselves and sit on opposite sides of the room. These students are 24 years old. Really, should I have to separate you? Come on. But they did separate without complaining, surprisingly. I had anticipated that he might refuse to separate from the other student, but he got up and he moved. At the end of the class, I had 3 students who were to leave the classroom early because they were to sell some pastries between classes to raise money for a school. And they left. They got up to leave, and the student who had been talking got up and tried to leave with them. The entire class said, no, you're not selling the pastries. You're not supposed to leave. You're supposed to stay here. He said, no, I'm selling them. I'm selling them. And the entire class told me he wasn't supposed to leave, flat out. And he just wanted to leave the class 5 minutes early. So I told him, I said, okay, only these 3 students are allowed to leave. You're not allowed to leave. And he still left with them. At that point, I was like, well, what do I do? He left. I'm not going to chase him down and look like an idiot. But so I just continued. I finished the class. Then I asked one of the students at the end of the class, I asked another student, is there a list or a teacher who is in charge of who sells the pastries every week? And she told me the teacher who was in charge. So I went and asked that teacher for a list, to give me a list of who's selling the pastries each week. So in the future, if I have this problem, I can look at the list and say, no, you're not selling them. I also asked the teacher, what do I do if I had a problem with a student? Because I didn't want to let it go unnoticed. If I had you have to establish early that you are in charge of the classroom. And if I just let him leave and didn't take any action, I had a fear that he would continue to walk all over me in the class whenever he wanted to. So immediately after the class, I talked to another teacher, and I told her the situation, what had happened, that I had a student leave class early without permission. And so she told me that I had to file a complaint about him to the Vie Scolaire. So she gave me the form, and it might be different depending on your schools, but there was a form, and I just had to describe in French the situation. I was able to write it, but if you don't know how to describe it, you can ask one of the English teachers at your school to help you translate it, or just to double check and make sure your grammar is correct and everything. And then you give this note to the Vie Scolaire, and what they do is they send it to their parents. To me, this seemed a little ridiculous for a 24-year-old student that they're going to send his dad a note and tell him that he was being naughty in class. But that's what they do, and so I did that. I wrote a note, and I said that this student was speaking in class when the teacher was speaking, that he left class 5 minutes early without permission. After that, I haven't had any problems with him, so I'm not sure if it's related to that or if he's just calmed down a bit. But I haven't had the same problem with him again. So that's one disciplinary action that I've taken. Another one is the one I mentioned in an earlier video where I had a student who just refused to speak English at all, even when I told her exactly what to say. So I asked her to go back to her other teacher, and she did. I'll link that first video below if you want to hear more details on that story. And then the most recent one was last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, I guess, 2 weeks ago. I had a class, one of my favorite classes that I really like, and one of my favorite students, actually. I split the class into 2 teams. We were doing the pictures activity, which I've posted a video about, where each team has a different picture and they have to talk to each other and figure out what the differences are. So my favorite student in the class, I put her on a team with a student that she did not like. And as soon as she realized she was on her team, she got all grumpy and was just like, oh, I don't want to work with her, blah, 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 blah. And the funniest part was, since it was an interaction between the 2 teams, you don't even have to speak to the people on your own team. You're speaking to the people on the other team. I tried to explain this to her. She refused to work because she didn't want to be on the team with that girl. She was just like, couldn't get over it. And so I tried to explain to her, you don't even have to talk to her. You're just sitting on the same half of the classroom as her. You're going to talk to your friends on the other team and explain to them about your picture. She still didn't want to work, and I felt really bad. It's really difficult when it's a student that you like. But she was being very stubborn, and she wasn't working. She was being ridiculous. So I just told her, you're going to have to go back to your teacher then. And she did, and I felt bad because I really like this student, and she usually makes a really great effort in the class. And the teacher, explained to her, when she went, I talked to the teacher after class, and she said, oh, she told me, like, she's making me work with somebody that I hate, and it's against my principles to work with the people I don't like. And the other teacher used this as a learning opportunity to tell her, what are you going to do when you have a job and your boss asks you to work with someone you don't like? Sometimes you have to do that. So the next week she came to the class and it was fine. So she wasn't, upset with me the next week. So it turned out all right. So I hope that this video was interesting to you guys. If you have any other questions or comments to share, any situations you had with difficult students, post them below and let me know what you think. Sorry this video got so long, but I hope it was helpful to some of you. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you later. Thanks. Bye.